You're in traffic. Someone cuts you off. Your heart rate spikes. Your jaw tightens. And before you even realize it, your middle finger is in the air. It happened again. You reacted, like always, not because it was right, but because it was automatic. Then guilt creeps in. Then the voice, why do I always lose control like this? Now, pause. What if I told you that wasn't you reacting, but a version of you trained by years of habit and unawareness? In this video, we're going to burn that version down, not with anger, but with awareness, reason, and iron discipline, because every untrained mind is a liability, and every reaction you don't own owns you. You were never born to be a puppet, but life through repetition and pain has made you one. And every time you lash out, shut down, overreact, or withdraw without conscious choice, you dig yourself deeper into that role. That's not freedom. That's slavery masquerading as personality. But there's another path, a way out, one forged in silence, refined in restraint, and weaponized through reason. The Stoics walked it. So can you. This is not about anger management. This is war against your lower self, against the instincts that betray you. And you don't win that war with emotion. You win it with training. Today, we begin. You weren't born calm. You were born screaming, fists clenched, breath erratic, panic in your eyes. That's what life looked like the moment you entered Itra, primal, uncontrolled. And for many people, it never evolved. They grow older. They gain muscle. They memorize words like respect, boundaries, maturity. But inside, the same wild animal flinching, snapping, growling at any perceived threat. Because that's what reaction is. A survival algorithm, not a decision, not a virtue, not power. Just an instinct screaming, protect me. Let me make this clear. Reaction isn't strength. It's fear wearing the mask of urgency. You yell because you're afraid of being unheard. You shut down because you're afraid of being seen. You ghost people because you're terrified of confrontation. And then you call it just how I am. That's not authenticity. That's fragility hiding in routine. Every time you react without thinking, you hand your enemies the playbook. Push this button, he explodes. Touch this wound, she retreats. Trigger this fear, and they collapse into themselves. You're not unpredictable. You're programmed. And in a world run by algorithms, the last thing you want is to become one. Now let's dissect the beast. Reaction lives in your nervous system. It bypasses your mind. It doesn't wait for consent. It's fast, primitive, and almost always wrong. Wrong for the long game. Wrong for relationships. Wrong for who you say you want to become. Because reaction has no memory of your values. No allegiance to your goals. It only serves the present tension and it worships relief over results. You know what that looks like. The quick text you shouldn't have sent. The door you slammed. The stupid insult you spat just to win the moment. And the silence that followed for hours, days, sometimes years. You got your release, but lost your respect. Tell me, how many bridges have you burned just to keep your ego warm? You say you have a temper. No, you have no training. You say you can't help it. But you've helped build an entire identity out of that excuse. The Stoics didn't believe in excuses. Epictetus said, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize your mind is complicit in the provocation. He didn't say, don't feel it. He said, own it. Because the moment you blame your reaction on the world, you hand the reins to chaos. And chaos doesn't care about your potential, it only multiplies your mistakes. Let's be brutally honest. You're not at war with traffic. You're not at war with your partner, your boss, or your past. You're at war with your inability to pause. Because that pause, the space between stimulus and action, is where men are made or broken. You feel the heat. And instead of breathing, you combust. Instead of reflecting, you deflect. Instead of choosing, you collapse. You're not triggered. You're untrained. And what you've mistaken for personality is just a survival pattern repeated so many times, it became your identity. But it doesn't have to stay that way. You can kill the beast. Not by suppressing it. Not by pretending you're fine when you're not. But by studying it, staring straight into the ugliness of your instinct, naming it, tracing its roots, and then deciding, is this reaction worthy of the man I'm trying to become? That's how the Stoics trained. Not in temples, not in theory, but in the fire where insult, pain, and chaos revealed their true selves. They weren't emotionless. They were relentlessly deliberate. You're going to feel anger. That's human. But do you use the fire or let it burn your house down? You're going to feel fear. That's natural. But do you, runner? Do you look it in the eye and respond with reason? You're going to feel the urge to react. But urge is not destiny. The animal inside you will always bark. But you, if trained, can choose whether it bites. Reaction is the language of the untrained. Response is the dialect of discipline. Choose wisely, because the next time life pushes you, you'll speak one of the two, and one of them will cost you everything. There's a moment. Invisible, quiet. It lasts less than a breath. But it's everything. It's the space between what happens and what you do next. Between being provoked and becoming a puppet. Between the surge in your chest and the chaos you unleash. Most people never see that space, because they never trained to. They say, he made me snap. She triggered me. That's just how I react. But none of that is true. No one makes you react. They just touch a nerve. You pull the trigger. You are the weapon. And that should terrify you. Because every war you've started, every relationship you've scorched, every opportunity you've butchered with your own hands, didn't begin with a disaster. It began with a split second, where you could have paused, but didn't. That second was the gate, and you walked past it like it didn't matter. The Stoics? They trained in that second. Marcus Aurelius called it the space where you regain your command. Epictetus said, it's not the events themselves, but our judgment about them that disturbs us. What they're pointing to is simple, brutal, and liberating. Nothing controls you unless you surrender the pause. Reaction is the speed of animals. Response is the timing of warriors. Here's the difference. When something hits you, someone insults you, cuts you off, questions your worth, your nervous system lights up. Adrenaline spikes, muscles tighten. Your mind narrows to a tunnel. This is biology, evolution. Your body is screaming, act now, defend, attack, escape. But here's the catch. You're not in a jungle. You're in a meeting, a kitchen, a phone screen. No lions chasing you, just your ego. And this is where untrained minds die. Because they obey that first signal without question. But the trained mind? It sees the signal, feels the surge, but doesn't move. Not yet. It waits. Not for hours. Not for minutes. Sometimes just 3 seconds. 3 seconds of silence. And in that silence, something ancient awakens. Reason, discipline, choice. Because when you wait, when you pause, you force the mind to come online. You step out of the emotional reflex and into the realm of intention. You go from being a slave to being sovereign. That's the battlefield. And if you win it just, once, you never forget how. You'll remember the first time you didn't yell back. The first time you didn't fire off that text. The first time you looked at the storm and chose stillness. Not because you were weak, but because you were dangerous and chose not to be. Understand this. The pause isn't passive. It's the most active thing you'll ever do. It's the moment you confront your default self. The angry version, the petty version, the frightened version, and instead of letting him lead you, overrule him. That's not weakness, that's mastery. But don't mistake silence for suppression. This isn't about bottling up your rage and calling it calm. It's about acknowledging the surge, channeling it. A warrior doesn't pretend the arrow didn't hit. He pulls it out, slows his breath, chooses the next move with precision. That's you now. Or it can be if you train in the pause. Here's how. Start small. When someone interrupts you, don't respond right away. When you feel the heat rise, take one breath before you act. Just one. When a message pisses you off, don't type. Don't reply. Step back, close your eyes, say nothing. Wait until the pulse slows and the fog lifts. Every time you pause, you punch a hole in the wall of reaction. Every time you wait, you tell the beast inside, I hear you, but I command this body now. That's how you reclaim the throne. Not by force, by presence. Because the untrained man reacts to survive. But the trained man pauses to dominate. You want to master your life? Start with the milliseconds. The space is there, always, waiting. And the moment you use it, you become untouchable. You think you're angry because they disrespected you. You think you're frustrated because the world keeps testing your patience. You think you're broken because life hit you harder than you expected. But what if none of that is true? What if the pain you feel doesn't come from the event, but from the story you told yourself about it? The insult wasn't the dagger. The meaning you gave it, that was the poison. This is what the Stoics mastered. Reframing. The power to rewrite the narrative in real time. Not with delusion, not with toxic positivity, but with cold, sharp, reasoned perspective. Because nothing ruins your peace faster than the wrong interpretation. Someone criticizes your work? You can see it as a personal attack. Or a mirror, a spotlight on your blind spots, an invitation to evolve. You fail at something important? You can call yourself a loser. Or data, feedback, proof that you're playing a game big enough to matter. You get rejected? It hurts. Of course it does. But pain isn't proof that you're worthless. Pain is proof that you're engaged. And that's where the shift happens. You stop being a victim of circumstance and start becoming the author of experience. The Stoics didn't live in denial. They saw reality with brutal clarity, then bent their perception to serve virtue. Epictetus was a slave. He didn't cry, unfair. He said, where is my power in how I respond? Marcus Aurelius lost children, fought wars, faced betrayal. He wrote, choose not to be harmed, and you won't be. They didn't reframe to feel better. They reframe to be better. Because the way you frame the world shapes the way you move through it. See adversity as injustice, you'll fight blindly. See adversity as training, you'll rise strategically. Here's the brutal truth. Your default narrative is a liar. It tells you they're laughing at you. It tells you you're not enough. It tells you the world is out to get you. But what it's really doing is keeping you small. Because the brain isn't built for truth. It's built for survival. And sometimes the stories it tells aren't reality. They're just shields, excuses, crutches that keep you from taking ownership. So, burn the script. Write a new one. One where every obstacle is information. Every conflict is a test. Every delay is a forge. Here's how you train this. Catch the story. Every time your emotions spike, stop and ask, what story am I telling myself right now? Interrogate it. Is this true? Is it helpful? Is it mine inherited? Reframe it. Not with fluff, with strength. How would a warrior interpret this? Someone disrespects you. Old story. They're attacking me. I need to fight back. Reframe. They're revealing their weakness. I don't need to join them in it. You lose a job? Old story. I'm a failure. Reframe. I just got time and clarity. Now I attack smarter. You get ghosted? Old story. I'm not lovable. Reframe. I just got spared from someone too cowardly to face real conversation. This isn't denial. This is combat logic. You take the hit, but instead of falling, you pivot. That's reframing. Not because you're soft, but because you refuse to give your enemy control over your mind. And when you master this, something terrifying happens. You become emotionally unshakable, not because nothing hurts you, but because nothing defines you. You walk into fire and choose what it means. You hear the insult and choose what it reflects. You take the pain and forge it into presence. This is what separates warriors from reactors. The ability to absorb the punch, then reframe the fight. The world will not stop throwing bricks. But you don't need to bleed. You need to build. Every setback, a lesson. Every insult, a signal. Every failure, a sharpening stone. The weak get wounded by life. The trained turn life into weaponry. Now ask yourself, when you get hit, what story will you tell? Will you play the victim or forge your response? The choice is always the same. The world pushes. You reframe. And you push back with direction. You keep trying to control things that don't belong to you. Their opinion, their tone, the outcome, the timing, the weather, the market, the traffic. Every time something slips out of your hands, you lose composure. Why? Because deep down, you still believe that control equals power. But that's the lie. The Stoics had a name for this delusion, attachment to externals, and it's the fastest way to become emotionally bankrupt. You yell at the slow driver. You obsess over what your boss thinks. You stay awake replaying that conversation, trying to rewrite the past in your head. None of it works, because none of it was ever yours to command. Let that sink in. Most of your suffering doesn't come from pain. It comes from resistance, from your refusal to let reality be what it is. You say, I just want things to go my way. But what if your way is flawed? What if your way is rooted in fear, ego, or insecurity? Epictetus said, some things are up to us, and some are not. Wisdom is knowing the difference. Freedom is acting like it. Here's the difference between the untrained and the disciplined. The untrained waste energy trying to control people. The disciplined channel that energy into controlling themselves. You can't stop the rain, but you can prepare your mindset. You can't stop someone from disrespecting you, but you can choose not to let it alter your character. You can't guarantee success, but you can train for it like it's inevitable. This is the Stoic battlefield, the circle of control. Inside the circle, your thoughts, your actions, your values, your interpretations. Outside the circle, everything else. Now look at your last emotional breakdown. Ask yourself, was I suffering from something inside the circle or outside? Be honest. If it was about being rejected, judged, delayed, ignored, you were punching walls that were never yours to move. That's not power. That's madness. The man obsessed with controlling the uncontrollable lives in permanent anxiety. But the man who masters his own reactions lives in permanent advantage. You want leverage in this world? Here it is. Control yourself so consistently that chaos becomes background noise. That's power, the kind no one can take. But how? Start by withdrawing energy from things that mock your control. The news, the comments, the algorithms, the outcomes. Redirect that energy inward. Build routines. Refine responses. Sharpen your value system. Stop arguing with people who don't operate by your code. Live your code so clearly that they have no choice but to adjust or leave. That's influence without force. But this also means giving up your addiction to outcomes. You sent the message. Good. Don't chase the reply. You showed up. You did the work. Now, detach from applause. Because discipline without detachment is just another form of control freak behavior. The Stoics weren't apathetic. They were precise. They acted with full force then let go with full faith. Marcus Aurelius said, "Just that you do the right thing, the rest doesn't matter." Not because he didn't care, but because he refused to be enslaved by what lay beyond the reach of his reason. Here's the paradox. When you stop trying to control everything, you start controlling the only thing that matters, yourself. And when you control yourself, you become a threat to every manipulator, every drama addict, every system designed to distract or provoke you. Because they can't reach you anymore. They push, you don't move. They poke, you don't flinch. They bait, you don't bite. Not because you're numb, but because you're clear. You know where your power ends. And that's exactly where your peace begins. So ask yourself, what am I wasting energy trying to control right now? And what would happen if I redirected that energy inward? You'll find the answer is not just calming, it's liberating. Because when the world spirals, the trained man stands still. He doesn't scream. He doesn't beg. He doesn't break. He breathes. He observes. And he acts on what he owns. That's how you move from reaction to dominance. From anxiety to precision. From noise to signal. Control is not about reaching farther. It's about tightening your grip on yourself. The rest, let it fall. Who are you? Not your job. Not your name. Not your goals. Strip it all away, and what's left? Your character. And character is nothing but a pattern of chosen responses. You say you want to be strong. Then why do you collapse the moment things get uncomfortable? You say you want to be wise. Then why do you lash out every time someone questions you? You say you want to be respected. Then why are you still reacting like a child when life doesn't go your way? You can't fake your way to identity. You build it, moment by moment, decision by decision, response by response. Every time you're triggered, you have two options. React like who you've always been. Respond like who you're becoming. That's the real test. Your identity doesn't come from what you say. It comes from what you choose when it's hardest to choose right. Look back on your last 7 days. How many of your reactions were aligned with your values? How many times did you pause before you spoke? How many moments did you trade principle for comfort? Now ask yourself, who am I rehearsing to become? Because every response is a rep. Every rep is a rehearsal. And what you rehearse, you become. You blow up during conflict? You're rehearsing instability. You ghost people when you feel tension? You're rehearsing avoidance. You freeze in tough conversations? You're rehearsing helplessness. And one day, you'll wake up, and that's who you are. Not because it's in your DNA, but because you practiced it for years. So start practicing something else. Practice standing still when you're tempted to run. Practice breathing when you're tempted to explode. Practice speaking calmly when your ego wants blood. Not because it feels natural, but because it doesn't. Discipline is built in unnatural moments. The Stoics didn't chase comfort. They chased consistency. Seneca said, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." They didn't wait for perfect conditions. They trained inside the storm. Because storms are where your real self shows up. You can fake discipline in silence. You can fake composure when everyone agrees with you. But in the chaos, in the heat, that's where the mask melts. And what's left is who you really are. So build the man who shows up under fire. One who doesn't need to react, because he's trained to respond. One who doesn't confuse silence with weakness, but uses silence as strategy. One who doesn't try to win the argument. He wins the moment by staying aligned with who he said he'd be. Understand this. Your response is not about the situation. It's a declaration. A declaration of your standards, your vision, your philosophy. When someone disrespects you and you stay grounded, that's not weakness. That's identity in action. When chaos erupts and you stay steady, that's not apathy. That's architecture. You're building something. And it's not built on feelings. It's built on principles. So stop waiting to feel disciplined. Act disciplined. Stop waiting to feel ready. Respond like someone who is. That's how it works. First, you act like the man you want to become. Then, slowly, you become him. Not by accident. By design. This is the moment you stop asking, "What should I do?" and start asking, "What would the highest version of me do right now?" Then you do it. Even if your heart's pounding. Even if your ego screams. Even if your body wants to run. Because identity isn't made in comfort. It's forged in friction. Every reaction you suppress. Every pause you master. Every measured response you deploy. It's not just strategy. It's a brick in the house of the man you're building. So next time life hits you, don't just react. Respond like a man who's been here before, who's trained, who's building something real. Let the world recognize your silence. Let your poise confuse their aggression. Let your calm unsettle their chaos. And when they ask, "How do you stay so composed?" you'll smile. Because you know, this isn't composure. This is identity. You're in traffic. Someone cuts you off. But this time, you don't flinch. Your pulse rises, sure, but your hands stay on the wheel. Your jaw softens. And your mind clear. You don't raise your voice. You don't raise your hand. You don't raise hell. You raise your standard. Because now you understand. That moment was never about the traffic. It was a test. Not of your mood, but of your mastery. The version of you that used to explode. Gone. Buried. Burned to ash in the fire of your own discipline. What stands in its place is quieter, but infinitely more powerful. Because when a man owns his response, he owns his life. You no longer chase control over others. You control yourself. You no longer chase peace. You embody it. Your reactions, they're not automatic anymore. They're calibrated, measured, strategic. Every pause now has weight. Every word now has spine. Every decision identity. You've trained your mind to respond, not react. And that makes you rare. Because most men are slaves to emotion. But you've become dangerous in your stillness. And here's the brutal irony. The world will never know the battles you fought to stay silent. They'll never see the rage you conquered behind the calm. They'll never hear the war cries you choked back with breath and reason. But you will know. And that's enough. Because mastery isn't public. It's personal. It's private. It's forged in moments no one else sees. That text you didn't send. That comeback you held. That insult you chose to leave unanswered. Those are your medals now. Not for others to admire, but for your soul to remember. And it doesn't stop here. This is not the end of your training. It's just the first confirmed kill in a long war against chaos. Every day, new triggers will come. New moments to prove that you are no longer who you were. You will still stumble. You will still fail. But now you'll know why. And that alone puts you ahead of 99% of the world. Now, pause again. Remember that voice from the beginning? The one that asked, "Why do I always lose control like this?" Now ask a new question. What would the highest version of me do right now? And whatever that answer is, do it. Again, and again, and again, until your instinct becomes integrity, until your silence becomes strategy, until your response becomes your signature. That's how warriors are made. Not in noise, not in reaction, but in repetition. And the world will keep testing you, because the world doesn't care who you say you are. It only recognizes who you prove yourself to be under pressure. So, become undeniable. Not by shouting louder, but by standing stronger. Now, it's your turn. Own your next moment. Own your next word. And when the world throws chaos in your face, don't flinch. Don't fight. Respond. If you've ever lost control and regretted it, leave a comment. Not to vent, but to mark the moment you chose to rise. We train here, together, one response at a time.